to Congressman Bennie Thompson, if you choose to plead the Fifth, you're guilty.
But if he's saying, okay, I'll come, but I'll plead the Fifth, then in some instances, that says you're part and parcel guilty to what occurred.
Join me now to weigh in, representing Florida's 1st Congressional District, Congressman Matt Gaetz. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me. So, Congressman, as I'll point out, the January 6th saga continues. It's like they're not going to let this go. They got to milk it for everything that it is. And it's all an attack on Trump. It's a witch hunt. And again, I asked some serious questions. I mean, I don't think they're going to ask real questions about what actually led up to January 6th, what the FBI knew, who Ray Epps is, where is he. They won't be answering any of those questions, I have a feeling.
This is why a majority of Americans understand the January 6th committee to be a totally partisan exercise. And almost all Americans are worried about the questions you asked about energy prices, about inflation, about economic circumstances that are crushing them. We just got the jobs report today. Joe Biden missing expectations by the hundreds of thousands because they've created disincentives for work. But here's also what we learned this week, Stephanie. Nancy Pelosi released the schedule for the Congress in the coming year, and it's going to break records for the fewest number of legislative days. Now, if you had control of the House and the Senate and the presidency, you'd think you'd want a lot of legislative days, but what you can see is they're not really going to move additional legislation. They're not going to solve any of America's problems, and so Liz Cheney is now gaslighting the Democrat strategy, which is to have a bunch of hearings calling the people they disagree with politically a bunch of insurrectionists. You played a clip from Bennie Thompson. I find that hilarious because recent reporting out of Just the News shows that Bennie Thompson has connections to an insurrectionist group called the Republic of New Africa that wanted to set up a black ethno-state in the United States of America. So these are very political people. I think they're very dangerous people. They have no agenda for the country. And now you see January 6th has to be their focus, even though it's not in focus for our fellow Americans.
And then in that clip that I played, Thompson says that if you plead the Fifth, that means you're guilty. I don't know, like last time I checked the laws, it's just not how the Constitution, everything works.
Well, this is a lot like the Russia hoax, where there is no real underlying crime, no underlying conspiracy. Remember, even the FBI has come out and said there was no grand orchestrated plan by Trump or anyone else to create the conditions of January 6th. So now what they're trying to do is use process crimes against people like Steve Bannon or Mark Meadows or Jeffrey Clark. I think Jeffrey Clark is actually an unsung hero for election integrity because he was aware of circumstances where Bill Barr's Justice Department was limiting investigations into voter fraud and into an attack on our democracy with fraudulent voters, fraudulent requests for vote-by-mail ballots. You had a culture at DOJ that was hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil regarding real election fraud. Jeffrey Clark was trying to animate and elevate those investigations so that we could ensure that we had confidence in the election result.
And again, nobody encouraged anyone to commit crimes on that day. And they continue to say President Trump, he told people to go storm the Capitol. No, he didn't. All he said was
Ray Epps did.
Ray Epps. Yeah, he certainly did. Also, have we gotten to the bottom of this? I mean, have you heard anything new on that?
So we are aware that Ray Epps is in Arizona, living his life, seemingly not in fear of any type of prosecution. We've sent letters to the Attorney General asking whether or not any people that were on the initial most wanted list following January 6th came off as a consequence of cooperation with the government. We know that Ray Epps was originally on that list, and then mysteriously he fell off of it. And as you covered, there was a couple in Homer, Alaska that got raided by the FBI because the FBI thought that they had Nancy Pelosi's laptop, when of course that wasn't even true. And yet, even though there are these videos of Ray Epps encouraging people to break the law, there seemed to be no rapid consequence or investigation into his behavior. And you have to wonder whether or not the FBI knew more in advance or might have had some of their assets or agents actually encouraging the more acute criminal activity. Those are the questions a real commission ought to ask. And you know what? If Republicans take the majority, we're going to disband Nancy Pelosi's political January 6th commission, and maybe we ought to start our own review of the facts, starting with the FBI and the Department of Justice.
And so you mentioned Ray Epps is just living his best life in Arizona right now. It makes me think of that time remember when CNN doxed an elderly woman because they didn't like a Facebook page event that she was promoting that was in support of Donald Trump. So where are these reporters that go to some elderly woman's home in Florida? Why aren't they at Ray Epps' home? I mean, does that make sense to you? It's funny who they want to go dox. If you're a Trump supporter, elderly woman, not in the public eye, they'll come and find you.
You know, what was interesting about the Ray Epps story is it was actually Thomas Massie, congressman from Kentucky, who thought that the cover story from Ray Epps was a little odd because he claims he is a dairy farmer for organic cattle on 5 acres of land in Arizona. And Thomas Massie, being an actual dairy farmer, knows that you couldn't possibly have organic grass-fed dairy cattle in Arizona on merely 5 acres. And so there are a lot of holes in the story, and you're right, the media seems to choose who they cover for and who they go after based on politics.
And you'd think that they would definitely want to find a so-called insurrectionist, a Trump supporter, MAGA hat-wearing guy telling people to go to the Capitol and to storm in. There's actual video of this, so it is rather curious that they're looking the other way on it, and that's what makes me wonder what's actually going on. Now, I want to ask you this. There's a rare alliance between Steve Bannon and some in the mainstream media, some of the big ones like Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, NBC News, and apparently these media giants have sided with Bannon in a push for a release of documents pertaining to his contempt charges. So I have a feeling the mainstream media, they have their own motives why they want this information, but it is unusual that they're on the same page on it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is just the first round in the war between Steve Bannon and the Department of Justice. And Steve Bannon already has the mainstream media lining up on his side. That doesn't bode well for the DOJ. I mean, it was Steve Bannon who brought us Hunter Biden's laptop from hell, and he has promised that this will be the misdemeanor from hell. I think it's very interesting to watch how the court will rule on transparency issues. Usually someone charged with a crime is trying to keep evidence under wraps so that embarrassing or, potentially information that can make them look bad doesn't get in the public. Here, you actually have the DOJ saying, please don't let us put out these things in public. And you have Steve Bannon doing everything he can to push for transparency to get to the truth to the surface. So I stand in total solidarity with Steve Bannon, and it is hilarious that the mainstream media does too at this point.
Yeah, again, I'm for transparency, so they should definitely release these documents so we can get a good idea of what's going on. Now, I wanted to update our audience on this. So the businessman who attempted to extort you for $25 million, or your father, he's pled guilty. And so I remember all the coverage on this, and there were a lot of talking heads who were suggesting that you were lying about all of this. And we even have a video clip of CNN's Chris Cuomo calling it a fugazi. We'll take a look at the video, and then we'll react after roll tape.
The investigation of what Gaetz did, you got to wait for the facts.
Right.
We don't know them.
The whole thing
but the
about
extortion thing?
Extortion, yes.
One might be fact. This extortion thing, fugazi.
Interesting. So has anyone apologized to you yet?
No apology, and not even coverage from CNN following the guilty plea of someone who now has admitted that they were engaged in a criminal extortion scheme against my family. And that really was built on this pile of lies. So it's quite something that CNN would put on their flagship, highest rated program, the assertion and reporting that I was just totally distracting and deflecting and misleading the country, when the reality is now people know I was telling the truth. These lies about me were intended to destroy me. CNN dutifully, gleefully did their part in that attempted destruction effort. Even one of their technical directors caught on hidden camera by Project Veritas saying that they knew this was propaganda, but the reason they did it to me was because they know I'm effective. I don't let the process be the punishment. And you know what, Stephanie? There's going to be a lot more to come on this extortion. Stephen Alford was not acting alone, and it's my hope that we continue to see the other people who were involved in this effort face justice.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just such a bizarre and wild story. Again, I believe in due process, and I didn't think you were guilty at the time of making stuff up like this, so I got to give myself credit here. But I'm just disappointed that nobody's apologized to you. CNN never even ran a story correcting it or the latest. I mean, that is a scandalous headline. You think they would be all over it, but of course not, because it doesn't fit a narrative. And I'm sure you just never imagined that politics could be this ugly and this dirty. Did you?
Well, I didn't until I got here and saw the Russia hoax.
Oh,
I mean, when
sure.
I used to believe the FBI and the DOJ were the good guys, and then I saw those entities weaponized against the president and the people who voted for them. And then I saw the way they tried to lock up Devin Nunes when he went and told Trump that our government was illegally spying on his campaign. And then I remember when they tried to deplatform and smear and destroy Jim Jordan, trying to make him prove that he didn't know something 30 years ago. So I've seen in Washington, D.C., when there are leaders who cannot be compromised, there is an establishment here that engages in just vicious destruction. But we have to keep our eye on the ball. We have to remember we're fighting for the American people. And right now, with the conditions we've been talking about in the show, economically, on those kitchen table issues, America needs fighters. And I'm proud to be here fighting for my folks.
Yeah, and then the man's name's Stephen Alford, 62 years old. He's facing a maximum of 20 years in prison and a fine of up to $250,000, according to Politico. So anyways, well, I have a feeling that there's more going on here, so I hope that you do get to the bottom of it, and we'll definitely be keeping an eye on it. Well, Congressman, we're out of time. Thank you so much.